Hi everyone, it's Nicole Spohr and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be creating a couple of graduation cards using new Simon Says stamp Born to Sparkle release products. We're going to be using stamps, dies, and stencils from the release for these fun cards. So I love the new cap and gown products in the release. I have been wanting something like this for a long time when I've been making graduation cards. So there's the dies and there's also a stamp set. We're going to be using both today. I'm going to start though by using the Congrats on a Line die. I'm going to use the die that is going to work for either an A2 card or a mini slimline. The other Congrats die that comes in this set is more suited for a slimline style card. I've die cut that from some black cardstock, and you can see that I already have my background panel and also my cap and gown already pre-die cut here. So I did a little bit of the work off camera. And then I'm going to kind of play around with some of the different elements to decide what I want to do. Ultimately, I decided to use the Happy Graduation on my second card today, and we're going to use just a smaller sentiment stamped and embossed on this bottom panel with the congrats to kind of finish off the greeting. Before we do that, I want to go ahead and put my Glitz Glitter paste on my background panel so that can begin drying while I work on any of the more time-consuming parts like stamping, embossing, adding some shading to die cuts, all of that good stuff. This is some gold Glitz Glitter Gel that we are applying with the Stencil Pal. This is the brand new Slimline Confetti stencil. So while this stencil is made to work specifically with slimline style cards, I wanted to show how you can use this for your standard A2 size cards as well. In fact, we're going to be using this on both cards today. I love the party type feel of this with the confetti. You can use this for birthday cards, congratulation cards of other kinds, and of course the graduation cards. I love that. I have die cut the graduation robe for this card from some Lawn Fawn number 2 pencil cardstock, which is a nice gold color cardstock. This is the cap and gown die set, and I am going to add shading with Copic markers in YR 24, 23, and 31. 31 is going to be used more as my blender, I guess, if you want to call it that. I'm using it as I would a blender Copic marker, where sometimes if things need to be blended out and lightened a little bit, it's not really a blender. It's kind of more of an ink mover, if you will, but this lighter marker is going to work great in that capacity on a dark colored cardstock. I personally love adding shading to colored cardstock die cut pieces because I think the difference, you can see the other side of the robe up there in the upper right corner of the screen compared to this left side. Look at the difference a little bit of shading makes. Gives all of those creases and things in the robe such movement. I love it, and it really only takes a couple of seconds. Not only am I going to do this for the die cut robe, but we are going to do this for the stamped robe as well. So I wanted to show you, no matter which of these products you choose, you can create something very similar. I noticed a couple little spots I wanted to fix on the other side, so I'm going to do that really quickly. But you can see just how much of a difference that makes in the overall finished design of this. Not only are we going to add shading to the robe, but I am going to add it to the cap portion up here at the top as well. And I'm going to also add a little foam adhesive under parts of the cap to give it a little depth and dimension. And then of course a little gold tassel which will match the gold confetti of our Glitz Glitter Gel background. I'm going to take those same marker colors and add a little shading to the cap. I should mention too, my background that I used the confetti stencil on. This is a 4 by 5 1/4 panel of Gold Rush Lawn Fawn cardstock. I don't know that it shows up super great on camera in video format, but in person it's got these little specks of gold in it and it's kind of shimmery. It is a beautiful gold cardstock. It's really different than a gold metallic, and I absolutely love it. It really is going to add a nice little bit of shimmery shine to this finished card. It is slightly smaller than A2 sized, meaning it's going to have a nice little white border all the way around. However, my congrats border that goes along the bottom is going to be 4 1/4 inches, meaning it's going to go side to side on the bottom of our card. So you're not going to have the white border there. It's a look I really love in cards. I'm adding foam adhesive now under the top 2 layering portions of the cap. There is a layering piece that I die cut from black cardstock that I'm adhering everything to. And that's going to give a little bit of dimension to this die cut. Let's add a little bit more foam adhesive here and put that other piece down in place. I don't know about you guys, but I love having my graduation cards ready to go, and Simon has really come out with some incredible graduation themed products with this Born to Sparkle release that I absolutely love being able to add to my collection. It makes creating graduation cards so much more easy. Okay, there is our cap and gown. We are ready to start assembling, and then we can add the finishing details and finishing sentiments and things like that. We're going to place our background panel right on our A2 sized card base, and then we are going to go ahead and glue down our gown. I'm not going to adhere the congrats border yet because I do need to stamp and emboss on that, and I want to do that before I place this on my card background. There might be some of the glitz glitter gel back behind there which could make stamping and embossing a little wonky, so I want to save that. I did glue the cap in place because it's a little bit smaller, but I used my tape runner for the gown pieces. I know I've mentioned this many times in the past, but I do try not to use liquid adhesive if I don't have to, simply because of the mess factor. I do use an awful lot of small die cut pieces, and really liquid adhesive is the best when dealing with that. Like, look at these little teeny tiny tassel pieces that come with the cap and gown. So stinking tiny, so I definitely used a liquid adhesive for those. I'm using an embellishment wand to help keep my fingers out of it and get that tassel where I want it to go. So cute. It really adds a lot to the finished design. Okay, we are ready to go ahead and do a little stamping and embossing. Let's move some of these other things out of the way. And I am going to take my congrats border now and a sentiment from the Class Act stamp set. This sentiment reads, "We're so proud of you." I'm going to use a powder tool first, ink up the greeting with Simon Says Stamp Clear embossing ink, and stamp that right below and sprinkle on some Simon Says Stamp white embossing powder. When I am embossing on black cardstock, I almost always use a powder tool. I almost always use a powder tool no matter what color of cardstock I am using, but it's so important with a black or dark color cardstock. It's going to help eliminate some of those stray embossing powder flakes from getting where you don't want those to go. I'm going to heat both the front and the back of my strip. I'm going to let that cool off just a minute so I don't smear the embossed greeting, and then I'm going to take a dry microfiber cloth and buff away that excess powder, because it really does kind of ruin the whole look if you leave it there. You can use your finger as well, but I always have these microfiber cloths in my craft room. I use them to clean my stamps and my work surface, all that kind of good stuff. And so I just took a dry one and buffed that powder away. Let's put some adhesive on the bottom back part of our strip and then place that right on our card. I love how bold this is. So stinking cute. I love this. And you could do this in any color to match any school colors that you need it to coordinate with. I decided to stamp a sentiment from Class Act on the inside of the card as well. We're going to stamp "Hooray, you did it." I like being able to finish off the inside of the card, and not only are we going to finish the inside of the card, but we're going to finish the envelope as well. Very, very simply, nothing very detailed with either of these today. Let's go ahead and put that sentiment stamp back and grab our metallic gold envelope from Simon Says Stamp and stamp one of the graduation caps with some cotton white stays on ink on that metallic envelope. And then it's kind of the perfect little frame up for the address on the front of the envelope. Also from the Class Act stamp set, this is for our second card, we are going to now stamp our cap and gown. So Class Act is where I got the larger graduation cap that I just stamped on the metallic gold envelope. We're now going to stamp the smaller of the two graduation caps and the gown on some smooth white cardstock using some Simon Says Stamp Sunshine ink. Now I had not stamped this image before and it didn't stamp super great just because it's brand new being stamped. I did use my Misty because I kind of thought that might happen. These are some pretty big surface areas, that gown is anyway, to cover, and sometimes it takes a little bit of work. I stamped it about 3 times here. I'm using my Stamper's Secret tool to help press the cover of the Misty down into that really well. Really beautiful. This is going to fade a little bit as that ink dries, but I want to show you that you can still take your Copic markers or any other marker or colored pencil tool you want to here and add some shading, and it's going to do for this stamped image exactly what it did for the die cut image, where it gives it so much more depth and dimension. It's really, really simple. I'm just kind of following the natural folds in the robe. I will add a little bit of shading to the cap as well. I don't want to leave that out. I want it to match. And then there are coordinating dies for these two stamped images. I really love that no matter if you love die cutting or stamping, you can create a very similar card. Either of these cards could be flip-flopped as far as decorations, embellishments goes. You could do the stamped cap and gown on the first card and the die cut cap and gown on the second one, and vice versa. Just whatever you want to do there. I'm loving being able to customize my caps and gowns to the school colors. Let's go ahead and grab those coordinating dies for this. And then we are also going to create a really fun background and use that happy graduation sentiment that I thought about using for the first card for this one, where we overlay the sentiments over the cap and gown. Just a little bit different look. But we're going to be doing a background stamped background, and over the background stamping, we're going to do a little stenciling. I love adding all of these different layers. I'm going to use a little repositionable tape to tape the cap and gown to the cardstock. before running this through my die cutting machine. I always like to double check and make sure they aren't going to shift. On the rest of that scrap of black cardstock that I used for the first card, I'm going to again use my powder tool and stamp that happy graduation. I have to say, I love the font and the size of this happy graduation. I can see using this all the time, and I'm really excited that there's a coordinating die for it that's going to cut a little outline around this sentiment. So I stamped the sentiment on the black cardstock with clear embossing ink. I'm adding a layer of white embossing powder. We are going to heat set this and then use the coordinating die to die cut our sentiment. I love the white on black here. I think it's going to show up really nicely against the yellow of the gown and then the light gray that we're going to stamp our background panel. And again, I'm heating the front and the back of the cardstock to help minimize any warping there might be. When the sentiment has completely cooled off, I'm going to actually clean my stamp first, put that away, and then I will grab a different microfiber cloth that doesn't have any cleaner on it to go ahead and buff away the powder from this piece before I die cut it. And that's just to remove any of that excess powder. Looking good. For our background, I am taking the new solid grid background. So there's the solid one, which I'm using here, which means all of the little squares are going to stamp in color. I'm using Simon Says Stamp Fog ink. And then there's also the open grid, which is little outline squares, which you can do a lot of other techniques with. I definitely have some plans to share some cards with both of these coming up. It's a great versatile background. Both of them are fantastic versatile backgrounds. There's so many things you can do with them. The ink looks a little blotchy right now as it's wet, but as it is absorbed into the cardstock, it is a dye ink. It's going to even out and fade just a little bit. It's a really, really nice light gray. I love how the cap and gown look against that background, and then that happy graduation. I think it's going to look amazing. Instead of doing the gold glitz glitter gel for this background with the confetti stencil, we're going to go back to our slimline confetti stencil. I am going to use some Nouveau Mousse in wrought iron, which is a really nice, very dark grayish black. You can see it here. I'm going to put a little bit down. I will say it stained my stencil. I probably could have scraped my stencil, cleaning it a little bit more with soap and water, but I didn't really want to, and so I just cleaned it the best I could. But it does end up being a little stained because this is so dark. I don't know that I've used this mousse very many times, but I love it against the light gray background. I'm using my stencil pal to get that nice, even, very thin layer, which means it's going to dry really quickly. And this is that stencil layer over our stamped layer. So I know it doesn't look like much yet, but once we add our cap and gown and sentiments on top, I absolutely love this background. I want to try this with all kinds of stencils just to do a lot of different layering. Even with this background stamp, I think this is a really phenomenal one for this technique. Now, I noticed that my stencil kind of got some mousse along the edges of my panel. I tried to wipe some away. I made a little mess there with my finger, little smudge along the side. I'm going to let it dry all the way, and then I'm going to try to remove it with my Tombow Mono Sand Eraser, which does work. It did end up working, yay! But let's just let it dry first, because when it's wet, it's going to make a mess. When it's dry, we can kind of see what we can do about it. In the meantime, let's stamp You're a Class Act from the Class Act stamp set with black ink on white cardstock and die cut it with a nested banners die. This is going to be the rest of the sentiment for our card. Then we're going to put foam adhesive behind this little sentiment strip, and also behind Happy Graduation. So both of those are going to be popped up on our card, and the cap and gown are going to be adhered directly to the background. Now this background is going to be, I did stamp it on a 4 by 5¼ inch panel, meaning we're going to have a white border all the way around. It's going to be a scant bit smaller when I put it on my actual card base, because I am going to just trim off, and I did it off camera with my paper trimmer, just the sides, because I got that Nouveau Mousse along the long sides, and because I had to trim those down, I did trim off a little bit off the top and bottom, so it was nice and even, but it's just a scant little bit. It's not a ton, just enough to get rid of that. And then I am going to use my Tombow Mono Eraser to get rid of this smudge. And I was pretty aggressive with erasing it, and I erased it enough that it doesn't bother me, and I was able to save my background panel. And surprisingly enough, this Nouveau Mousse did not take long to dry. The Glitz Glitter Gel did not take long to dry either. When applying with that Stencil Pal, especially, I have found when you use the Stencil Pal, it applies such a thin, even layer of the product that it dries really, really fast. We are going to adhere our cap and gown then to the background, kind of just trying to center it. Look at all that confetti around it. I just love it. And I did put some acrylic blocks down to help hold everything flat while the liquid glue behind the cap is drying. And then we're going to peel off the backing paper from our foam adhesive strips and pop that in place. We're also going to remove the backing paper from the little sentiment strip I created. And then all we have left is to create a coordinating envelope for our second card. So because I used the Class Act stamp set for this one, I decided to go ahead and stamp that cap and gown right there on a white Simon Says stamp envelope, again using the Sunshine ink. And then we're going to just overlay that with a little Congrats Grad over or on the bottom with black ink. It still provides plenty of space out to the side to handwrite the recipient's address if you're mailing it, or their name if you're handing it to them. And then we're also going to stamp Congrats Grad inside of the card. So both cards today have finishing sentiments inside. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for these graduation cards featuring Simon Says Stamp Born to Sparkle Release products. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here is another video featuring Simon Says Stamp Born to Sparkle Release that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell to never miss a new card making video. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I am so grateful you're here, and we will catch you next time.